This is Eating Crow with Pete Durand. Hey everybody, welcome to another compelling episode of the Eating Crow podcast. I'm here with Amy Robertson, who I'm excited because Amy and I did a prep call before this, and I was blown away by some of the stories she has to share. She's got a very successful career, but she's got a lot of moments that on a personal level have motivated some change in her career, and we're going to jump into them and learn. So Amy, welcome. Tell us what you're doing today, and we'll get into how you got there.
Well, thanks, Pete. This is a lot of fun. I mean, I've been back to back today on meetings. We were just talking about that, and what a nice little break it is to get out from under that.
Yes.
So what I'm doing today is I have a company called Soul Advantage, and SOUL Advantage. So your soul.
Yes.
And the premise behind that is, you know, I have been a chief human resources officer. I've been a vice president at Fortune 500 company. But really it was time for me to offer something that was more fractional in nature. So I wanted to be able to provide companies who may not be ready for a full-time CHRO or couldn't afford a full-time CHRO, but they still wanted this strategic help and foresight on how to do things. So that's really what I'm offering now is some fractional CHRO services. And I'm also doing some programs, projects that are more strategic in nature, mergers and acquisitions, talent, culture projects. So a lot of fun.
You know, you jumped into being an entrepreneur, and you've certainly been a leader in some pretty substantial organizations. So your story fascinates me. We met when you were a client of mine years ago, and I thought to myself, this is a person I need to keep an eye on. She's going places, and obviously you did. And you know, when we talk about the things that registered in our initial conversation, empathy, emotional intelligence, a lot of self-awareness, you lit up. You had some things that, look, I can share this. So you're in the business of developing people and teams already, but you did it at a very high level, as you said, in global Fortune 500 companies, which, you know, that's macroeconomics. You're trying to move high volumes of people in high growth organizations and move big things. And now you're in your own business and you're trying to think about how to grow that as well. So why don't you share with us kind of what led you from, you know, Red Hat to Channel Advisor, and then to Channel Advisor to Soul Advantage? Give us that kind of quick story, because there's a lot that we'll drill into once we hear that.
Sure. Well, so we'll start with the Red Hat to Channel Advisor piece. Red Hat was a great opportunity. It was just being on a bullet train.
Yeah.
You know, I got there when there were about 1,800 employees, 250 million in revenue, and left when there was about 11,000 employees and, you know, almost 3 billion in revenue. So it was really an amazing ride. And I was there about 9 years.
Wow. And
every day was an adventure there. It was so much fun. And that's the reason why I stayed there. And I know my boss was the CHRO, and I love her dearly. She's been such a huge impact on my career. But we would always talk, and I would say, well, you know, the minute I'm not laughing or learning, you know, then I'm probably going to start leaving. And what's funny is I look back on my decision to go to Channel Advisor, and it wasn't that I wasn't laughing or learning, but what I think I realized was, you know, I'm a creator, not a maintainer. Yep. And so as a company gets bigger and bigger and bigger, it's hard to create things at the speed that I'd like to create them. So what was interesting to me about Channel Advisor is it was still in the tech world. It was global, and it was local. It was, you know, right here in my backyard. And, you know, I'm a North Carolinian, and I plan to be for a very long time, if not forever, at least my whole lifetime. And so it was a great opportunity because they were going through some change themselves. They were ready to move into the world of like, what's our mission? What's our value proposition to our employees? What's our strategic roadmap or plan?
Mm-hmm.
And those types of things really interest me because you're creating something, you're morphing something into a new era.
Right.
So I'm thankful for that experience because so that was my impetus. I was like, okay, I feel like I might be able to do this.
That's great.
So Channel Advisor was a great run. It was about 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And gosh, the HR team and other teams there did so much work, put into place so many new things, kept the things that were working from the past. Really a group of people that are so passionate about e-commerce and just about their day-to-day work.
Yeah, they are.
I would say that the primary reason why I started losing some interest at Channel Advisor is my mother was diagnosed with a terminal illness, had been diagnosed with a terminal illness, and we were struggling with her decision to stay at home for the remainder of her life, and we needed to call in hospice. And so I was very close with my mom, and just the going to a workplace every day with in the back of your mind knowing that someone you love might need you.
It's tough.
So part of the reason why I left was because I had a precious limited time and I didn't know how much. And so my heart was not there.
Sure.
And I think my actions, you know, were complementary to where my heart was. So I was also thinking for years, I've been with some of my colleagues and close friends talking about starting my own business. I mean, I have thrown around doing full-time mergers and acquisitions work, which I love.
Yep.
To fractional CHRO, to anywhere in between. And so my husband and I had a discussion and said, you know what? I think the world is giving us a signal that it's time for you to, while you are helping your mom ease into the end of her life, how about let's ramp up something that you've been thinking about for a while? And so we did. It must have been insane for me to think that I could do this, but I was lucky enough to get my first gig with a company that was local that needed a fractional HR leader 3 days a week. And that left me with 2 precious weekdays
Mm-hmm.
to drive to Winston-Salem and to spend with my mother. So I don't regret that one bit, but it was a major change.
You know, you said you're never going to regret it. Those signs are there when you have to look at your personal life and your professional life, and you were being pulled, right? You were being pulled that direction. And a lot of entrepreneurs, by the way, you recognize that when you left Red Hat, right? I'm a creator. So you're creating something on your own, and you were able to have some incredible memories and time with your mother at the same time, which is fantastic.
Yeah,
So,
and I believe that during this past year, it's brought my whole family together. You know, my extended family, my brothers and myself.
mm-hmm.
You know, my kids, my husband and I. It just has been. You know, I jokingly referred to it on Instagram last year as the summer of Amy, and it quickly turned into, you know, the fall, winter, spring, and summer again of Amy. So, you know, I've just started taking a little bit more care with my personal relationships than I ever thought I would.
You know, we look for key moments in a podcast to name the podcast, and yours will be called The Summer of Amy. It's perfect. It's great.
It's awesome.
That's eye-catching. So, you know, Amy, We focus on leadership and entrepreneurship on Eating Crow. And the things we focus on are those moments in our lives where we had to eat some crow, right? Where we made a change to our thinking or our thought process. I've had them. Everybody's had them on the show. When I teed this up for you in our prep call, you're like, oh, I've got them. And you fired away off at me. And I was like, that is really powerful. So, if you're listening to this podcast, get ready for this next section, because this is going to tee everything up. Amy's got some incredibly powerful moments in her life that have caused her to rethink some things that show a lot of depth to her personality. And you talk about your family being in a good place. I think there's a lot of reasons why, and it's because of this pivotal change you made when you ate some crow. So I'm gonna tee this up for you to tell the story, and I'm gonna listen. I can't wait to hear it again because it's great.
Yeah, I think of eating crow. I always think of eating chicken wings. Like, are they spicy or are they roadkill?
Yeah, they're more roadkill for sure.
Yeah, I would say that, and I'll try not to get weepy. I'm this deeply emotional person.
Sure.
So I have these like, woo. So I would say a pivotal moment. They all converged.
Yep.
They were all kind of coming into me at once. And I would say that one of the big pivotal moments of when I knew I needed to make some sort of change in my style was the first time I did a for real 360. Okay. You know that moment where you're like, I'm feeling pretty good about myself. I feel comfortable and confident.
Yeah.
And, I was getting a larger team, and I was getting great feedback from my boss and boss's boss and some stakeholders and some from my team, right? I was getting that. But then when I went to survey everyone anonymously, I think, obviously a lot of it, and most of it was very, very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
But I do recall there were a couple of comments, in the write-in answers, like what should Amy stop doing?
Yeah.
And so that was the first part where I was like, I think I got my feelings hurt a little bit. It was, the description was using the word hubris. Mm-hmm. And that, Amy can come across a little too confident, a little too demanding, a little too goal-oriented, but using the word hubris was like, I think I had to go look it up, honestly. I was like, dang.
What do they mean?
I know. I was like, is that a good word or a bad word? So, so I could say that, that was my first like eye-opening, like, you're not all that, Amy. So why don't you go ahead and figure this out? And I think that came maybe a year or two, maybe a year before another thing happened in my personal life. And leading up to that, I would always say this was pre-call or after call, right?
Right.
My life pre-call was hard driving, demanding, I don't lose, like, mm-hmm. I don't not succeed, I will win, mm-hmm. And if you're surrounded with me, you better darn well get into the rhythm of winning, because I don't lose, right? And which is such a jerk move, right? It's such a jerk thing to think. But I was hit my goals at all costs, because my job was, I really wanted to make my leader look good and my team look good, right? Mm-hmm. But I didn't realize that the people that I was giving black eyes to people that I was elbowing out of the way, mm-hmm. So I didn't have a lot of consideration for what was going on in people's personal lives. And so PC stands for pre-call. I mentioned that. I got a call one day. My husband and I did, and I got it at work from my daughter's school counselor. And she was 12 and in early 7th grade. And the counselor said, Ms. Robertson, you and your husband need to get over here. I've got your daughter in my office and she needs to talk to you. and of course I'm like, what, she forget her lunch, she's, and she's like, she's harming herself, she's cutting herself, she's depressed. And wow, I mean,
How do you take that call? Yeah.
I ran out of my office crying with my boss and her assistant holding me up, basically, because it was just out of nowhere.
Sure.
And so, fast forward a little bit is, my daughter was going through some serious mental health issues. And we never knew it. And so we spent, many years following that, just, my husband and I would take turns sleeping on the floor in her bedroom to make sure she didn't kill herself.
Wow.
We just went through every resource we could. So, very long story, a little bit shorter, is the fact that, when you get a wake-up call like that and you are presented with a problem within your life that you don't have a solution for, and my husband's an engineer and he's always got like his ruler and his duct tape, and he's like, if I gotta fix it, right?
Yeah, I'm an engineer. My wife looks at me sometimes like, no, that's not what I'm looking for.
Yeah. So
Right.
it really was humbling because, one, work and success at any cost is not success. And it doesn't matter how successful you are in life. The world will remind you that you're human and you need to take care of things. And three, wow, extending a little grace to your team doesn't mean your team won't be successful or hit goals. What it'll mean is you'll try to figure out how to navigate life's little potholes and do it better for it, right? And develop a bond. So really hard lesson to learn, and really hard to put into practice as well. So I would say that I had, I'll mention her, Delissa Alexander, the chief people officer at Red Hat, was my boss at the time. Superstar. And I could say that she modeled the behavior that I now want to give. Like, she would extend grace. She would say, what do you need? What can I do? Do you need me to clear your schedule? She goes, I don't need to know the details, but I understand. It looks like you're having a hard time. What can I do? And, that was remarkable given the amount of pressure on deliverables and what Red Hat HR needed to deliver at the time. And she was, always willing to say, what can I do?
Unusual for someone at that level in an organization that is that big. Like you said, they get there because they're pretty hard charging themselves, right? Mm-hmm. But she conducted herself in a way that will be a lasting memory for you and an example for you, which is great. So, when we talked about that moment in your life, right, where I've had a 360 as well, right? Sometimes they're written anonymously, but I know who wrote very specific sections in mine. I still have mine from GE from years ago, and I look back at it because
me too.
I need to look back at it and go, yeah, I'm doing that again. Got to fix that. Mm-hmm. But the 360 was one thing. When your daughter, when you recognize your daughter had these challenges, what were the changes you made in your home life and your work life that allowed you to get yourself back on this track?
We just started, how you clean your closet and then you reorganize, or your pantry, you kind of go through your pantry and you look at the canned goods and this one's expired, and okay, throw it over here, and this one's still good. So what are we going to make dinner with this week? And so I think what happened during that time is my husband and I really, as best we could, cleaned out our pantry and reorganized. And so we just really only had time to focus on certain things. And so what we knew was like, well, we still had to make a living and we had to keep our family safe. And that's really what we focused on. And so, and self-care, we really put into place, you know, those communication techniques you learn in prior years. So, you know, years and years ago, he and I went through some marriage counseling, right?
Sure.
And it helped us learn how to talk to one another. And so we just kind of pulled those back out and used our I feel statements and our reflective listening and tried to figure that out.
Well, Amy, that's important because, and we're gonna, I think part of your platform now, your passion is obviously mental health, right? And I think
Absolutely.
when parents go through something like this, not only can it, you know, the impact that's going on with the child, but it sometimes divides the parents.
It can easily, I see
Right.
it. I do some teaching for Nami-Wake County, and I help facilitate classes for parents who are going through the exact same thing that my husband and I went through. And I think you have to think about things that you're all coming from a different perspective. You know,
Sure.
your frame of reference is different. So, you know, using that engineer example, my husband was in the engineer mode, like there's not been something that I've been dealt with so far that I can't fix. So let's go fix it. What do I do? Right. And I think that me, on the other hand, by working in human resources for so long, I kind of got the whole like, wow, this is going to take a little bit more effort.
Yeah.
And he and I were not on the same page for a while. And I tell you what really helped was finally, so we had to go through, my daughter had to go through a couple of therapists and a couple of psychiatrists to get the mix right, the care plan right. But we landed on a psychologist that was a family psychologist as well. And so we would always start the sessions together as a family. And then we would split out and our daughter would be the remainder of the session. And that was really helpful. Now, we've done so many things wrong.
Sure.
And there's a lot of things to critique, right? We didn't bring our son, who was 3 years older than our daughter, into the fold of knowledge because we thought we would be distracting him from his high school years. And what in reality, we were just, you know, appearing that we were doting on our daughter for no reason.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And so, you know, we've all discussed this now and everything, but you know, there's some things that you can always look back and do better. But
that's why I started this podcast. my entire life could be that way. Oh man.
Oh, I was taught this back in my Red Hat days. Like, you know, you want to be a certain person, and then you look back at the end of the day, and your behavior doesn't represent that. And instead of beating yourself up, you call up your friend or you text your partner or whatever, and you go, well, I declare upset on today. Like, I'm just going to have to declare upset. I did not win this one, but tomorrow's a new day. Right. And you really have to be able to do that.
So, you know, first of all, thank you so much. There are a lot of people that will benefit from that story. And what I believe is a happy ending at this point, right? Everybody seems to have, you kind of rallied. Your daughter's in college now, I understand.
Yeah, she's 18. She lives in her own apartment with her roommates, and she's got the tools in her toolbox to deal with what comes her way. And she recognizes symptoms if she's going down a rabbit hole, as we call it, and she gets herself back on track.
That's wonderful.
We're the lucky ones. There are people that their illness is so severe, it's difficult to get to remission.
No, I certainly can. And you're right. As an engineer, I can tell you and by the way, I had a career in health and wellness, which is how we met, right? So
Mm-hmm.
exercise, nutrition, I can do the math there. The formulas are straightforward. As an engineer, I can solve those problems. And my family, my wife's family, they both have history of mental illness. And it is the one area that I just I can't grasp it. I can't understand it. It's so difficult to figure out. And it is incredibly frustrating as a family member to watch this, but then try to figure out how to engage. And then, as you guys did, you have to figure out how to work the system.
Yeah, I think that's hard. I think that, I think unless you've gone through it, it's really hard to
Mm-hmm.
empathize. Um, but I do think that people are becoming more aware. I mean,
Sure.
it really gets on my nerves when we talk about physical health and mental health. It's like,
Right.
it's all health. It's all physiological, right? If you do your research and you can educate yourself on that, you'll see that it's all one health.
Sure.
And the more we can talk about it that way, I think the better.
Yeah.
But that's one thing I think COVID has brought out in us these days is the ability to say, I'm a little anxious today, or I'm kind of depressed, and
Yeah.
starting to talk about things before they get so severe.
Yeah. And I have had coworkers who, we went from one day to all being at work together every day, which was a big part of our social interaction. Our mental, emotional outlets are solved by exercising your brain, interacting with people. And the next day, there's no more of that for months. And some of our peers and you're dealing with live by themselves, right? They don't live in their hometown. So they had no one to interact with physically for months at a time. That's hard to process. So, switching gears from the personal side, how you adjusted and how your husband and your family and your kids kind of found a new normal. And like you said, cleaned out the pantry and have kept it clean. When you think about Soul Advantage, and there's a reason you chose that name, and you look at, I think you described yourself pre-call with a different, harsher word than you have now, right? And how are you counseling organizations and leaders today about how to weave these issues into, I think there's a couple aspects, right? Recruiting talent, hard to identify people that come along with some challenges already. And then the existing talent that you have, how are we, I mean, companies have had EAP programs for years. You and I both know very few people used it.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we weave that kind of help into the normal part of a working environment so people feel like they're comfortable? As you described, I'm having a day I'd kind of like to, to forget about. What do I do? So give us some thoughts on how Soul Advantage is helping companies deal with that.
Yeah, actually, that's a great question. So I'm helping a company right now. They span across multiple business units, different businesses, different types of customers, different requirements on the job. But one of the things that they've realized is that flexibility in the workplace helps everyone. And
Okay.
flexibility for you looks different than flexibility for me,
Certainly.
right? So what we're doing is we're creating talking points and trainings and guidelines and process to help encourage just taking a moment and back, like, let's just rethink the way work gets done. Because when you have your personal life and your work life competing with one another,
as they are today, yep,
your work will mostly win out, right? I've got this deadline, I've got this thing. But when you know that your work is supportive of your whole self, your soul and everything encompass that, then you make good choices, right? You know that I need to get this work done, but I also need to go teach my kid how to throw a spiral in the backyard, as my coworker this morning told me.
Bingo.
And so it's a trust thing, right? You get rid of the fear of not performing, the fear, right? So think about what I said before. If you had a manager like me 10 years ago, I was like, Where's your work? Where's your work? Are you done? Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. You know, I don't care. And people were like, well, I've got to choose that,
Yeah.
right? I have to choose this. But if you have a manager like Amy is now, it's more like, okay, we've got some competing priorities at home and at work. Let's have a conversation. Let's walk through your priorities. Let's see what really has to be done by a certain deadline, what can be put off. Let's see if, there's people on the team that probably have extra time. They probably have a skill they want to develop. Let's use this as a development opportunity. So the key, in my opinion, to all of this is the manager. It's the managers up the chain and down the chain. So it doesn't work if there's a broken link, and I've seen it plenty of times. The manager is the person that is inviting the person to be themselves.
Now, when you think of the audience for much of this counsel that you're providing, have you noticed any differences between, I'll just say, our generation and the younger generations in their reception to this kind of feedback and input and coaching? Are there certain groups like, hey, wait a minute, that's kind of my family life, let's leave it out of it, versus other like, yeah, I want to talk about this?
Yeah, there are people generationally, I don't see too much generationally.
Interesting.
What I do see is, I think you're a private person, you're an introvert, or you're kind of in between, or you're an extrovert. And so I think there's just some people who prefer a little more privacy. And so I'm not advocating that everyone needs to be open about because we don't have time to hear an hour-long version of what happened this weekend, right? Like, I mean,
you wouldn't want to hear what happened to me this weekend. No.
Yeah, I mean, I care, but I don't, right?
Right.
So it's kind of distracting, right? We have this professional relationship, but you can have this softening around the edges. And so not everybody has to share. You just have to come up with really great team norms, right? Let's describe what working as a team looks like. What's it going to look like if you've got to take care of your elderly parents and hit a deadline, or help your kid get on e-learning and take your dog for a walk because you're home all day, All
good examples. I've always felt in some of the peers, Debbie Edmondson was one of my key HR executives for years. And Debbie and I had a really good working relationship because I understood completely the value of what she brought to the table, right? And some people are always like, well, HR is going to be like, we need to be soft here and do it. No, HR comes in and their objective is to help the company and the employee, right? So there's a very business understanding there. But what I have discovered, if you want to lead or manage people effectively, it can be an exhausting process, right? Because it can't be done in a spreadsheet. It sometimes can't be done in email. Sometimes you need to pick up the phone or have those tough conversations. And it's just as you described, let's go through kind of what your day is like. Let's figure out what is a priority, what's not a priority. That takes an incredible amount of time. But at the end of the day, it's the only way to show an employee, as we talked about earlier, empathy or emotional intelligence, that you can relate to what they're really going through. And sometimes you have to pull it out of them, right?
Right. Well, think about it this way. Let's say you're on some social app, right? And you get a pop-up ad. How irritating is it when you get a pop-up ad that really has nothing to do with you? You're like, why are you sending me AARP stuff, right? Or whatever.
Sure.
But how helpful is it when it's configured to you as an individual?
Right.
Right. And so that's the way that I tend to view management is it's, the old one size doesn't fit all approach.
Yep.
It rarely applies anywhere in people management. You really have to individualize your approach. And it's not about how you want to communicate. It's about how the person can hear what you're saying. And so you have to modify. So so that, you're not going to give the same message. You're not going to give the same ad to every single person. Right. So it
I'm in
is exhausting.
I'm in digital marketing, so I understand how important relevant content is. That's just what you're
Yeah.
describing, is it has to be relevant. I can imagine any organization can benefit from this level of guidance, particularly as you described, management is the key. They're the key link. If it breaks down there, that is it. What always frightens me is a manager who's not aware of what's going on in one of my most important teams, because now that's impacting 15 people. And if those employees are not getting that empathetic, understanding approach that's proactive, we're at risk. So that manager training is so important. Are there particular platforms or modules that you use with your customers, or have you repurposed kind of your own Amy type content? What's the go-to for you there?
For me, I typically design original content
Okay.
based on a lot of different sources.
Got it.
So it's more of a boutique approach. Look, if you want to go get the essentials of people management course, you can pull that off the shelf. I mean, anywhere, and it'll probably be a lot cheaper than me and just as effective, right? But if you want something that's kind of that's woven in through your culture, your values, your business plan, and meeting you where you are today, then that's the better. Now, I do have to say I've been a fan of Josh Burson for a very long time as a thought leader in human resources. I have some friends and former colleagues that have, moved away from our former companies and have gone on to be their own chief people officers, and they're a great source of information, and things that they do are sometimes leading the pack. And I really love the language around the True Tilt and Tilt 365 products that Pam Boney created. And that was the 360 product that I used. But it just gives it's character based, and it really gives a common language for your whole company to talk about, how to leverage your strengths and do things in a way, give feedback and work on yourself in a safe environment.
I've been doing this a long time, and I've gone through a couple, what I'll call refresher courses, or new ways of looking at some of these trainings, character-based training, conflict management, whatever you want to call the different terms. And when they're done by the right presenter or the right instructor, I watch the room. I'm watching the room and seeing how the light bulbs are going off, because it can be really engaging. And I walked out and I was open. I said, look, I've learned things today that I should know. Right? These are things I should be doing, not only for myself, but with my team. How am I conducting a one-on-one with an employee? And when I'm doing a check-in, what are they getting out of it? And I take them seriously. So when they fill it out and they say, here are the things I could do better, here are the things I need from you, I'm looking at them and going, holy cow, what would cause them to think that? And how do we do it? And how do we follow up? And how do we make sure those things are done? If we don't understand, particularly today, doing these kind of meetings over a Zoom call, that personal connection, a person can pick up on your vibe when you're with them in a room, but when you're over a Zoom call, it's harder to do that. So your ability to pay attention, right? And that's a key thing, not missing the signs or the signals.
Right.
When an employee is struggling, that's got to be a big cue that you look for.
Yeah, I think it is. And the evidence comes from all different places, right? And, they may not, if they're a private person and they may not be willing to share as much detail about what's going on at work or home that might be impacting them. So it's a harder nut to crack.
Yeah. Probably takes some time and some trust to be built.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is not a speed reading course. This is developing relationships. And if you're willing to develop it deeply, your employee's going to see right through you. I mean, I can see when people are pretending with me, can't you?
Absolutely. If it's not authentic, I'm not buying it.
Yeah.
And it takes time for them to realize that it is authentic. So there's a show on right now. My wife got me to watch called Yellowstone. I don't know if you've watched it
I've
at all.
heard of that's on my list.
So there is a character. Her name is Beth. She's complicated, and she has a romantic gentleman named Rip, who has figured out how to get through to her, and it's physical. Like literally, when he's with her, he will almost just kind of gently. Is it okay to put my hand on your shoulder? And he knows when it is or not. He knows when to back off. He's literally figured out, to your point earlier, I need to communicate with this person in this very specific way. And there's probably only one other person in the whole show that can do that with her. And it's a mastery in both verbal and physical communication, how he has done that. And I know that works with employees. And there's a way and the type of question you ask someone that conveys authenticity and a genuine interest in how they're going to respond. Like you said, if I sit there and somebody rattles off the 5 questions they know they got to ask and they don't care about my response, I'm done with them. Mm-hmm. But if they've keyed their next question off my first answer, then I know that they're engaged, right? Well, that's not what I expected here. So Pete, well, let's talk about that. Now I know that I've got someone who's genuinely interested in how I'm feeling or what I'm doing.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I can't connect. I have not connected with every one of my employees in that manner. You know, there are some things
it's hard to do.
It is so hard to do. And sometimes you're just on different thought paths. And so it just takes a lot longer to bridge it together. And sometimes I haven't been able to bridge it together before they've left or I've left or whatever. And, I hate that. I mean, it does stink.
Well, and there are some employees that don't want that type of connection. They have kind of made it up, and it's not rude. It's just, I'm not here to connect on that level. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes the best way to engage there is to let them know you understand that.
Yeah, I respect that.
Yeah. Like, I'm here for you. I genuinely care about how you're doing. Here's some things I'm observing. Process them and come back when you want to. I get it. And, I have one of those personalities that can be a little bit boisterous. So I've got to recognize when some people don't want to engage with that. And that's perfectly acceptable.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So Amy, when you think about the next steps for your business and the type of customers you're going after, what are the companies that excite you that you think you can influence and drive change? Are there particular types of businesses that you're finding attractive?
You know what's funny is we talked about this for years. I had this snobbery around. I only wanted to work with tech companies and fast growth, and it's like, and I almost looked down on other industries, and in which, now that I've been in consulting, my clients who are different than the typical mold that I may have targeted in the past are teaching me some new things. I tell you what, I have learned so much. And so I think that, obviously I love tech companies, but what I love even more is these companies that, the light bulb's going off and they really want to go through some sort of transformational change, whether it's I'm going through a merger and acquisition. We are trying to change towards a more flexible workplace. We just got funding and we're getting ready to grow like crazy. What we need, those are the types of companies that jazz me, because they're thirsty for doing, achieving their goal, which is going to be a huge change, but doing it in a way that supports their employees and that ecosystem. Sure. One of the chief revenue officers I used to work with used to say, to be a great sales guy or lady, you had to have the right mix of ego and empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of adopted that. I mean, I know the people I like to work with and for, and it's people who have that right mix of ego and and empathy. And so thank you, Paul Forty, for that. But it really rings true. I'm not going to be a good fit for people that need too much structure. Although I'm a very structured person and I love structure, but if you want me to just follow the rules and not be as creative as possible, then that might not be the best route. And then if you don't put culture and people first in your business, or customers first, then it's not going to be a good fit, right? I don't do HR for HR's sake. That's just not what I do. And so I'm a business person and I know people and culture. And if you're a business person who appreciates people and culture, then let's get together.
I love the closing math problem, right? The ratio of ego to empathy. That's really good. And if you think about people that other people are naturally drawn to, they have that right balance, because people are drawn to happy people, positive people, optimistic people but if those people are narcissistic, right? I mean, I might appear happy and with myself, it's pretty quick to turn off. But if you have empathy and you can relate to those around you, that means you're going to create an environment where a culture can naturally follow, as you described. Mm-hmm. Here's what's great. Results typically follow, mm-hmm. right? When you have that right balance, you don't have to wonder which one comes first.
Absolutely.
Yep. The right empathetic leader that has the right balance of ego will drive results, because people they would like to follow them and be part of that success versus feeling like I have to.
Right.
So that's a great thing. And I'm going to, when we publicize this podcast, I'm going to, in the written section, the snippets, I'm going to bring out that ratio right there, because I think that's a great thing that you described, right? Then you can is it Paul? You can give Paul the credit
Paul
for it.
40. All props to Paul 40.
Paul 40.
Yeah, tell you great. What, I mean, you learn something everywhere you go, and I've learned. I feel like I learn a million things with every person I've interacted with. So, and still learning.
Well, that's why people are going to seek you out now at Soul Advantage and try to figure out how you can help them.
I'd love to.
Perfect. Amy, this has been wonderful. And I have to say, I'm just very grateful for you to open up and share your story, because there are people that will benefit greatly from this. And I wish you nothing but the best of success. Listen,
thank you. And the thing that I have to say is, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, the NAMI, has local chapters. I'm on the NAMI North Carolina board, and I'm also affiliated with NAMI Wake County.
Got it.
They have excellent websites, excellent resources, and they have a helpline. So if there's any questions, they can point you to the right people, resources, groups, whatever. And so I would just encourage all of your listeners or watchers to share that with themselves and their loved ones.
And we'll put those links and posts down in the comment section as well, so people can see those.
That'd be awesome. Thank you.
Amy, you're awesome. Thank you so much. Take care. Really appreciate the time.
You too. Alrighty. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
You're welcome.
Thanks for checking out Eating Crow here on YouTube. Drop a like and subscribe so you never miss a video.